Eufaula was about 3 miles from Catawba. Well, I learned the hard way that it was a lot farther than that. I caught a ride, looked from Newton. Newton was near my grandfather Klein's home, and my uncle had let me out at Newton. I was going to thumb my way along the highway with the cars that were available at that time, and the people who stopped to pick me up were drinking. And I was afraid to stay in the car with them controlling it. So I told them that I was going to get out at the next town, which was Catawba. And so they let me out, and I walked down to the railroad track. I saw that there was a red light, but I didn't know enough to know that that meant that there was a train waiting to come across the railroad bridge. And so I walked on out on carrying my luggage and walking. I was going to walk to Eufaula, 3 miles I thought, but it turned out to be about 6 miles. And when the train came to the bridge, I could see it, and I was on the track. There was no way I could get off the track as far as there was no ground. It was over the Catawba River. And what I did, I crawled down under the tracks on a pillar that came up out of the water and supported the tracks on a level basis. And that train whizzed by, I could almost touch it with my hand. And I was very frightened. But after it got by, what I didn't know was that there was a second train waiting to come across the bridge. It had been on a side track for several minutes waiting for the other train to make its move. So then I hurried. I really tried to run, but I broke my sandal that I was wearing and picked it up in my hands. There was no sidewalk across the river, but when I got close to the other side, I jumped. And the bank of the river was coming up by then, and I didn't have to jump more than 6 feet probably and roll. But that was what saved me from being hit by a train in Catawba. We had some experiences just recently with Linda, and she was hearing about this, and we wound up in Catawba because of a traffic jam on Highway 40. Anyway, the next time a train came by, I was still walking to Eufaula, but I ran and hid in the bushes. I didn't want anybody to see me so they could put 2 and 2 together and understand what a foolish thing I had done. Anyway, that happened at Eufaula, and a lot of interesting experiences happened in some of the small towns of my life. When I was living at Durham during my college years,
yeah, go ahead. Well, you want to stop?
Yeah.
All right. Why do you think Granddaddy decided he wanted to be a preacher? When his brothers and sisters were all farmers, right? Basically.
It was not quite correct to call them all farmers. And some of them didn't seem to be farmers at heart. There were in the 14 children, there were several farmers and several married farmers. My father never really did much majoring in farming while he was there, and I've not talked to him about why. He may have had household duties or something of that sort. But what happened at the barn, the whole family went down at milking time, and they milked by hand. And I would be surprised if my father hadn't been a participant in that milking scheme. Then they ran it through a separator to separate the cream and the milk. And there were times when the milk wouldn't sell, but the cream would. They'd sell their cream and give the hogs the milk.
So why do you think Granddad became a preacher?
I think some of the revivals my father attended as a boy in his home church, and his mother was a very religious woman. Her Bible and her North Carolina Christian Advocate were her two favorite things that she read. Every afternoon she'd finished her work in the kitchen. She went and sat on the front porch in the swing. They lived in a beautiful home in the country. They had electricity before we had it at our little towns that we lived in. And so she was a great inspiration in my father's life. They all were church people. They all were church people all of their lives. Now, they're all dead and gone, but they certainly were supportive of the church and its mission. And there was not another preacher in the crowd, but my father was inspired by other preachers and by his family, and they supported him. They invited him to come back and preach in their church, which was the Methodist church. All of those things, plus the fact that he was a student. He was a student who could pass his work. And he got in, one year he went to college. It was a junior college. And the name slips me right now. But after he had finished all of his high school work, and not quite all of his high school work, but most of it, he went on to, that was at Rutherford College. That was the college I was trying to pull out. It was Rutherford College. There's still a little town named Rutherford College, but this college has been gone a long time. And then he went to Duke and finished a 4-year course in 3 years without going extra months. That all put him in good stead as far as being a minister was concerned, and I think all of those things had something to do with it. If he didn't enjoy reading the Bible and working toward the things that the Bible directs us to, he would not have become a preacher. And then he was known as an evangelist lots. The Methodist Church ordained him and gave him a church at Louisville,